I am highly honored to join you here at the university in welcoming Her Excellency Nirupama Rao. She is Ambassador of India to the United States. We also welcome her distinguished husband, Mr. Sudhakar Rao. He's the former Chief Secretary of the Indian State Government of Karnataka, as well as Dr. Srinivasa, who serves as consul at India's Consulate General, who's with us as well. First, let me observe that India, the world's largest democracy and one of its truly great powers, has always sent its best and brightest as ambassador to the United States. As you will soon see, Ambassador Rao is no exception. In the world of international diplomacy, she is truly a star, and we are so fortunate to have her today at the BYU campus. Yesterday, as we walked across the historic grounds of Temple Square, and we were guided by a lovely young sister missionary from India with a long braid that went clear down the back of her, on her back. And as she explained who she was and we were walking, Ambassador Rao brought up a picture on her iPhone of her as a young 17-year-old schoolgirl in South India, also with a long braid. I asked the ambassador, then as a young woman, did you dream then of entering the world of diplomacy? And she responded immediately, yes, I did. And here she is today with us, at the very pinnacle of her profession as ambassador to the United States from one of the world's great countries, and certainly almost its most populous nation with almost 1.2 billion people. After completing her university studies with an MA in English literature, Ambassador Rao joined the Indian Foreign Service. Her rise through the ranks was spectacular. In addition to a fellowship at Harvard, her and many other diplomatic assignments that she fulfilled in Washington, in Beijing, and in Moscow. She has served as India's ambassador to Peru, Bolivia, Sri Lanka, and is the first woman ambassador to China. In 2009, Ambassador Rao was appointed India's Foreign Secretary. This is the highest office in the Indian Foreign Service. In 2011, she was appointed Ambassador to the United States and began her service when she presented her credentials to President Obama at the White House. Ambassador and Mr. Rao are the parents of 2 sons. Ambassador, we welcome you and look forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. You've been most generous in your introduction. Thank you for your kind words. Dr. Rogers, Dr. Larson, and dear friends. Before I commence my remarks to you today, I wanted to express my condolences on the death of one of your fellow students. I saw the flag at half-mast when I was coming here. I believe he passed in a climbing accident, and he was a very bright, young, talented man. When a life like that is snuffed out, it's a terrible tragedy, and I want to share my sorrow with you. I'm here to speak to you obviously about India and about the relationship between India and the United States. This is a relationship between 2 of the world's, I would say, most important democracies. And if you look at the map before you, India is a country that is geographically very distant from the United States. But there are many commonalities and affinities that bring us together. Of course, the relationship is founded on the very strong realization that as democracies, we respect diversity, we celebrate pluralism, and we have enshrined and respected the rights of every man and woman and child in our constitutions and in the conduct of our governance. India and the United States have had a relationship that is not just something that happened yesterday or day before yesterday. Through history, through the history of your nation and through ours, there have been many, many linkages that were established between the two countries from historical times. In fact, from the days before your independence, when you threw tea into the Boston Harbor. And of course, that tea may not have been Indian tea. We started growing tea commercially much later, but it was the same East India Company and the British government that you resisted and won your independence from, and that we fought much later and won our independence from also. Today, of course, we would advise you very strongly not to throw tea into any harbor, because it would be a waste of perfectly good Darjeeling, as they would say. But be that as it may, I think there's been a great fascination here in this country for India, and your poets, your philosophers, your writers have written at great length about Indian culture and civilization. You all know about Thoreau and Emerson and their writings, and Walt Whitman, of course, his beautiful poem, A Passage to India. And I must say that in modern times, when we were battling non-violently for our freedom, that was a struggle, as you know, led by Mahatma Gandhi. His correspondence, in fact, with a lot of American thinkers and personalities, is very interesting to read, and people, historians and researchers, are looking at that today. In fact, just the other day, we had Ramachandra Guha, one of our preeminent historians, whose book, India After Gandhi, many of you must have read. He was here, in fact, traveling up to Swarthmore College to look at the Quaker archives, the Quaker correspondence with Mahatma Gandhi. And just like that, I think you constantly discover these gleanings of very interesting interaction and communication between your country and ours. And all of you, of course, know the whole saga of your civil rights movement and how Dr. Martin Luther King was inspired by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. So our histories are very intertwined. I just wanted to say that even if the geographical distances may separate us, today we live, of course, in a very interconnected world, and that interconnection between our two countries is not only based on the new technologies, but also on this natural affinity and empathy that we have felt for each other through the ages. India, a country of 1.2 billion people, as Mr. Hardy just mentioned, we are well poised to become the largest nation on earth in terms of our population. Today, of course, we're running second to China. I don't think we have a desire to overtake China as far as our population is concerned. And we certainly, I believe that the population growth will be contained gradually, and it is already, in fact, dropping in a number of our states. As you know, India is a union of states, just as you're the United States of America. We're a union of states. And in fact, this year, 2013, again, there's an American connection here. It's the 100th anniversary of a certain stream in our freedom struggle called the Gadar movement. Gadar means revolutionary, Gadar movement. And it happened to be created and founded in the city of San Francisco in California 100 years ago, when Indian students and migrants who came to work on the farms in California came together to found a movement to seek the freedom of India. And if you go to San Francisco and visit the Gadar Memorial Center over there, you'll see some of the archival documentation from that time, including newspapers published by the Gadar Babas, as they were called, the people who were involved in the Gadar movement. And there's a map of a united India there called the United States of India. In fact, that was the vision they had. They looked at the United States of America and they envisioned a United States of India on that model. Be that as it may, when we were, in fact, creating our own constitution as a democratic, secular republic, there was a lot of discussion that went on with your constitutional lawyers and Supreme Court justices in Washington. So there again, that connection. But what I wanted to say that we're a country of 28 states, in fact, provinces, and at least 22 languages enshrined in the schedule of the Constitution, but many, many more that are not mentioned in the Constitution, so hundreds more, and thousands of dialects. So diversity really is a very defining characteristic of our republic and ourselves as a country. And we've built unity out of that diversity. And that is the truly exceptional nature of India. And when you place a strategic bet on India, as I believe the United States has, I think it is out of this conviction that India, as a democracy built on diversity and successfully dealing with that diversity and uniting various peoples together, deserves to succeed in this great mission of becoming a more developed country, of alleviating poverty, of accelerating its development. So that is the reason I think you have to believe in India, and that each and every one of you should go there and understand the complexity of the country. And it doesn't lend itself to easy definitions, India. You have to go there, you have to study it, you have to be prepared to embrace it, wrap your arms around it with an open mind. And I think India will embrace you back, and it will be, a beautiful friendship that you will be able to develop over the years with our country. And I think that is happening already with 3 million people of Indian origin, the Indian Americans, as they are called, who live here in this country, who have made it their home, who have succeeded beautifully in what they have sought to do. In fact, many of them highly qualified. At least 40% of that number are graduates. They hold graduate degrees and PhDs, and they are engineers and doctors and lawyers. And now coming into politics also, we have 2 Indian American governors in this country, the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, the governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley. We have 1 Indian American in the United States Congress, Ami Bera, just elected from California. He's the 3rd Indian American to have served in Congress. The first was Dilip Singh Saund in the 50s. He was one of those people I mentioned who came to California in the early 20th century, the likes of whom founded the Gadar movement. He went to Congress. And we had, the second person was Bobby Jindal, who later became governor of Louisiana, who is now governor of Louisiana. And we have Ami Bera and many, many more. Just yesterday I met Mr. Simranjeet Gill when I went to the Indian Cultural Center. And he's a district attorney in Utah, an elected official. And I believe he's the first Indian American to hold that position, I would say, in this part of the country, definitely. And it's certainly a first for the community. So in many ways, this community, which has become American now, but retains very strong ties with the motherland, India, that provides that bridge that connects our two nations, bringing them even closer together, because you see so many Indians in your midst today. So they don't seem foreign to you anymore, because you meet them in your neighborhoods, you see them in your small towns, and even in the rural communities, maybe as doctors or teachers. And therefore, this awareness of India as a nation, as a democracy, as a fascinating civilization and culture has come home, as it were, to many, many Americans. Many universities today have India studies programs. The top universities in this country, for instance, are studying contemporary India. Of course, traditionally, you have studied the culture, the religions, the philosophies of India. But today, increasingly, here in this country, and I think this is a very encouraging development, people are looking at the political economy of India. They are studying contemporary India, the economic growth of India, the diversity, the provincial, characteristics, because with all our languages and geographical distances, India is a large country. Of course, it is not as large as the United States, but it figures in the list of the world's largest countries. And very great diversity also in terms of climate, in terms of terrain, in terms of local cultures all across the country, and also economic development. The coastal areas of the country have really been transformed in the last few decades because of economic growth and infrastructural improvement and globalization. And then there are parts of the interior of the country where development must accelerate much more in order to lift people out of poverty. What are our priorities today, you may ask me? Our priorities are to make India a fully developed country, period. That is really our priority. We want peace and stability in our neighborhood. We have no ambitions to take over the world, as it were, because we need to focus on what our tasks are in terms of national development within the country. As I said, we want to alleviate poverty. We want to educate our young people. A vast majority of our population is young. 65%, I would say, is below the age of 30. And that is the demographic that we want to concentrate on. Educate them, skill them, provide them with constructive opportunities that will make their tomorrows much better, much brighter, much more beautiful. So that being our priority, we obviously have to increase the educational opportunities that we offer our young people. We must improve infrastructure in terms of our roads, our communications, the provision of electricity and energy to our people. That is extremely important. And you'll be happy to know in the last 9 years, we have added more electricity to the national grid than we did in the previous 65 years. And that's the kind of acceleration. But today we have about 130,000 megawatts of electricity being generated in India. But just to give you an idea of the tasks ahead, we need 950,000 megawatts by 2030, which is just about 17 years away. So we have a lot of work, many miles to cover. And obviously, we have to keep our focus very well trained on the tasks that need to be accomplished. And we need energy for that. We are an energy dependent country in terms of the fact that we have to import close to 75% of our energy needs from abroad, from the Middle East, and farther afield from Africa, from Latin America. And with the shale gas revolution here in the United States, we are hoping and very seriously intent on being able to obtain imports of shale gas, liquefied natural gas from the United States in order to service our energy needs. And the discussions are going on in terms of this with our the relevant organizations here in this country. The pillars of the India-US strategic partnership, I'll speak briefly about that. What is this partnership about, you may ask? I've given you the context in which we are placed today. President Obama called this relationship a defining partnership between two great democracies, a defining partnership for the 21st century. And it certainly is, and to that I would add that it is a partnership for peace, for prosperity, and for progress. The progress of both our nations, the prosperity of both our countries, peace not only within our nations, but in the world at large. And it's a partnership, as I said, built on pillars like security cooperation, the fight against counterterrorism, on developmental partnerships like in health and energy and education and science and technology and agriculture. These are the pillars on which we build this partnership. And trade and business, they're also important pillars of our partnership, our strategic global partnership today. Trade and business contacts have grown phenomenally in the last few years, but are nowhere near reaching their full potential. So again, there's much more work to be done in this regard. Our trade touched about $100 billion as of 2011 in goods and services. But the potential, what we can achieve, is so much more. The Indian economy is accelerating in terms of its growth. Some of that growth has slowed down a little because of the global recession and certain supply-side constraints within India. But we're tackling that, and we are reasonably confident that the growth rate will pick up again. And it's important that it does, because every half percentile of growth that we're able to achieve in excess of what we've done before translates into lifting so many millions of people out of poverty. So it's absolutely critical and crucial for us to be able to accelerate that growth rate. So we need much more business and trade engagement between ourselves and investment from the United States. Investment is an imperative. There is no choice about it. We've opened our doors to the world, our markets to the world. It's a liberalized economy, and foreign investment is welcome in the country. And US investment has grown over the years, and US companies, many of the Fortune 500 companies, operate and do business in the United States. In fact, just to cite an instance, Citibank, for instance, has been in India for over 100 years now, and a number of other US companies that have done business for decades in India. And they have today, US companies have at least 750 research and development establishments in India, because India has become the place for innovation, because we produce a great number of scientists, technologists, engineers, and that has really become a mecca, as it were, for research and innovation for the rest of the world. And the US companies are no exception. They have availed of these opportunities and are doing good business as a result. We need to increase these ties. A lot of US investment has gone into the services sector, which has grown quite, dramatically in India over the last couple of decades. But we need more US investment in manufacturing, because that's where the jobs can be created for, as I said, the millions of people, young people, whose aspirations for the future are so big and very legitimate aspirations. So we can work together on that also. So as I said, it's a partnership for prosperity and progress. So I hope that the trade and business ties between the two countries, which are an engine of growth in this relationship, can accelerate even further. And any bottlenecks in this regard, we are obviously committed to resolving through dialogue, through give and take between our two sides. On the fight on counterterrorism, which is, homeland security, that's a very important part of the dialogue between our two countries. As you know, India lives in a neighborhood that has been affected by terrorism, by the operations of terrorist groups that have an extremely nihilistic agenda, as you know, who are anti-progress, anti-development, anti-women. I see so many women in the audience, and we as women need to understand the gravity of the threat that we face from groups such as this. I've been in Afghanistan many times, and I know the seriousness of the situation concerning women there, and the threats and the violence that they have been victims to as a result of the operation of these groups. So we, the United States, here in the United States, you all, and we in India, obviously, have great need to strengthen our cooperation, to resist and to overcome and to exterminate these groups that threaten our progress. So there's much work we can do on that front, particularly as we look at the situation in Afghanistan post-2014, when there will be a drawdown of foreign troops, US troops there. What happens to that country? How do we preserve the progress that has been registered there since 2001? Ensure that there is no regression to the Taliban times, and make sure that it is free, that country is free from foreign interference, that it is allowed to grow as a hub for trade and connectivity between Central Asia and South Asia and the rest of the world. So this is just to illustrate. Similarly, our cooperation in the Indian Ocean and the Asia-Pacific. India is an Asia-Pacific nation. It is an Indo-Pacific nation. If you look at the map, the way we sit astride the Indian Ocean, we're very much at the center of the map when you look at that region. And so the maritime routes, the security of those routes, keeping our oceans free from the threat of piracy, from the proliferation of weapons, from smuggling of drugs and weapons of destruction. In all this, our navies cooperate together. Our military-to-military cooperation has expanded greatly in the last few years. We exercise more with the United States forces than we do perhaps with any other country. And the procurement of equipment and weapons and aircraft from the United States has also expanded considerably. It's in the region of $10 billion at the moment in terms of, you look at the last 7 years of procurements, and much more in the pipeline. Just 3 days ago, the first C-17 built at Long Beach, California, for the Indian Air Force took off from Long Beach on its way to India. So similarly, we have the P-8I aircraft, the Maritime Reconnaissance aircraft that we are buying, the C-130 Hercules aircraft, and many more such examples can be cited in terms of our defense cooperation. So just to also, before I end, to say that the political understanding between our two democracies has reached a point never before reached in the past. Your president, our prime minister, they share a wonderful understanding and friendship between themselves. Your Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, the largest country caucus in both houses is the India Caucus, the caucus on India and the Indian Americans. Very, very active, very, very vociferously championing the cause of US-India partnership. So I'll end there to say that the relationship is in a very good place today. There's much more to come, much more to be realized in terms of its potential. And all of you are very much a part of this great enterprise. Thank you.
So the ambassador is willing to take some questions from the audience. For the benefit of those that are listening online or via radio, we have a microphone, so please raise your hand, wait for the microphone, and then we ask that you identify yourself. If you're a student, tell us what you're studying, and please keep your questions brief. Thank you.
Okay.
ma'am. I'm Ankur Jalan from Bangalore, India. I'm doing PhD in organic chemistry here. So my question is regarding the counterterrorism efforts between India and United States. So India has been seeking the custody of David Coleman Headley for quite long, and recently our Home Minister visited United States and reiterated India's stance for his extradition. But why do you think United States is like quite reluctant to provide the custody of Headley to India, who has been a mastermind of the Mumbai terror attacks, and we have enough evidences to prove that. So is the Indian government asking the US government to provide his custody? Are the efforts going on?
The short answer to your question is yes, the efforts are going on. We continue to seek the custody of David Headley, and discussions in this regard are continuing, and the request was reiterated during the visit of our Home Minister.
My name is Randy Booth. I'm the Associate Dean in the College of Fine Arts, and we've been able to come to India on many occasions with our singers and dancers, and my first trip was in 1982, and it was our privilege to visit on that occasion with the late Madam Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. She was so warm and was so intrigued by our students, and we were privileged to spend quite a lengthy time with her as she shared with us her vision for India. She was particularly interested and was commenting on education. And I would be interested in just knowing what are the initiatives, what is the approach of your Minister of Education, what kinds of things are you doing to ensure that every one of your children in that ever-growing population will have the educational opportunities needed?
Thank you for asking that question. In fact, our Minister for Human Resource Development, Minister for Education, was here a fortnight ago to meet with your leaders and your academic community to discuss higher education partnership between India and the United States. In fact, as part of the strategic dialogue, we have a higher education partnership between India and the United States. And this dialogue was initiated in September of 2011, and it has been taken forward, particularly in 3 areas, one of which is skill development and vocational training, which involves your community colleges, because the success that your community colleges and technical colleges, I think you call them in Utah, have achieved in terms of skill development is something that interests us greatly. And as I mentioned to you, in terms of the demographic, the youth bulge, as you can call it in our population, we have to devote a great deal of attention to building capacity in skill development in India, apart from increasing the number of universities and colleges that will provide the space and knowledge for our young people when they finish with their high school and seek to enter the portals of higher education. So there is a great deal of transformation occurring in this sphere in India. We already produce, a great number of university graduates, as you know, 650,000 engineers last year. That's a huge number, much bigger than any country in the world. But that's not enough for India today. We'll have to expand the number of universities, we'll have to expand the number of colleges. And of course, in terms of our school education, we have to ensure that we get more and more girls into school, that we don't have school dropouts, that parents continue to send their kids to school through the 12 years of schooling that is needed. So all this requires a great deal of monitoring, and it requires, we'll have to expend more resources and train teachers and develop the curricula that is 21st century oriented. All this is receiving a great deal of focus. Work is being done in this regard, and there is a great transformation taking place all across the country. Young people are thirsty for knowledge, and they are intelligent young minds, ready to absorb, ready to even learn the new technologies, use tablet computers, for instance, so that they can access the rest of the world. We are laying a fiber optic network that will link 250,000 of our villages in the next year to year and a half. And that will be the backbone on which this communication with the rest of the world can ride. And when our minister was here recently, we had a very interesting meeting, 2 meetings in fact, with edX and Coursera, because these are the so-called massive open online courses. So how do we use online education? You know, India was a pioneer in online education back in the mid-70s when we launched the Open University system, in which there are 3.5 million students today, just accessing open education through telecommunication and through the new technologies. So India is very open-minded also about accessing these new means of delivering education and knowledge. But that doesn't, in any way, should not detract from the importance of the classroom experience and training faculty and building capacity among our teachers to be able to provide students with answers to the questions that they raise, or amplifying what they're able to absorb online, because questions will be asked, and we need to make sure that there is that human interaction also. So we're aware of all these needs and these priorities. So this is just to illustrate the educational revolution that is taking place in India today. You know, Mahatma Gandhi used to call it the Nai Talim meaning new education, the education that provides not just education but knowledge, that really amplifies the mind and provides a young person with that vision to absorb and to constantly be seeking knowledge from all over the world. Because I don't think education is a process that ever ends for any of us in our lives. And so that is the way we look at it.
My name is James Goldberg. I'm also a Punjabi Gill on my mother's side.
I see.
You spoke about the long history of cultural interchange between the United States and India. I was wondering, out of contemporary Indian filmmakers, writers, and artists, if there are just 2 or 3 you would recommend to American students as examples to continue this cultural dialogue into our generation. Thank you.
I wonder if you've seen the movies of Meera Nair and Deepa Mehta. I think both of them, of course, are expatriate filmmakers, but have very strong roots in India. And the movies they make are Indian themed or have much to do with the subcontinent and with the history of the subcontinent, or with social complexities within our society, in terms of cultural mores and traditions, and how contemporary life reacts to these, and in the kind of tensions that could be generated as a result. Extremely, I think, great, creators of wonderful movies. So those 2 names definitely come to mind. You must have, of course, seen the movies of Satyajit Ray, and he belongs to the hall of great movie makers anywhere in the world. There's no doubt about that. The Indian movie industry, of course, expresses the diversity of India. It's not just Bollywood, which comes out of Mumbai, but also the regional studios that produce a lot of movies every year, and all of them reflecting the regional dynamic of the country. A lot of these movies are now subtitled. They're available digitally and in DVD format, and I'm sure you have access to all that. They're shown, and Indian movies today, they're simultaneously released here in the United States and in India. You can see, a movie, the day it's released in India, you can see it here also. That's because of the large Indian community here. But they're playing in many mainstream cinemas today. You can watch them. So it's become much more, encapsulated in time and space today. Mm-hmm.
My name is Gideon Burton. I'm on the faculty in the English department, and I've had some opportunities to oversee students doing field studies in southern India, and we love your country. And by the way, recently in the Kennedy Center, we did have a Bollywood Summer Film Festival organized by Corey Leonard. We very much enjoy Bollywood, as well as Ray and other filmmakers.
Yes.
I read that you were voted one of the 100 most influential women on Twitter. And I wonder
Yes.
if you could comment on that, and if you think that the social media is important for women or for political purposes, or what your views are on the new media.
Yeah. Well, I see myself as a communication strategist, I would say, not only as a diplomat or a foreign policy practitioner. I think it's very important to grasp the importance and the strategic importance of communication in today's world. And in that context, to be able to deal with and to adapt to and to utilize the new technologies that are available. So social media is one of them. And I started using Twitter about 2 years ago when we were engaged in evacuating our Indian nationals out of Libya. When the Gaddafi regime was disintegrating and there was much instability there, and we had about 20,000 Indians who were stuck in Libya and they needed to be evacuated. And communications were breaking down. And one of the best ways to reach out to them was on Twitter, to be able to tell them when the evacuation flights were expected, where they should be congregating in order to be helped by our embassy and our consular people. So that's the way I started using Twitter. I was then the Foreign Secretary of India. And I noticed that, how effective it was as a medium to put across a message in a very concise, compact, and very economical way, and in terms of use of words, that is, but that you could get that message across and it would be disseminated in an instant to so many hundreds or thousands of people. So I was initiated into Twitter in that fashion, and then I began to use it in order to draw attention to something that India was doing and positive developments in India, our position on whatever foreign policy issues were in the news, and also to respond to queries from people seeking information about India. And I also now use it in order to tweet about, perhaps something in the cultural domain, or a book that I've read, or people that I've met. So in the process, I find that there's a lot of interest in seeing somebody in government being able to present a human face. And I think that it helps from that point of view also. So I'm quite comfortable with the use of Twitter now, and I intend to continue to use it. But of course, you have to be extremely all there and conscious of what you're saying, because once you've pressed the send button, it's very difficult to retract what you've said. So there's need to be fully aware of what you're saying and doing, particularly when it comes to Twitter.
My name is Mattathias Westwood. I'm an undergraduate studying history here at BYU. I'm also a Gill on my mother's side.
I see.
I wanted to ask, considering what you said about the role of America and India as strong democracies with a tradition of protecting pluralism, how should we as democracies face threats to pluralism when we have ethnic tension at home or cultural tensions over divisive issues? This is a major issue for both of our democracies as we seek to move forward.
I think that's a very important question again. Let me tell you, in India, obviously, since we are a democracy built on diversity, we have different religions, different languages, and from time to time, there will always be some expression of perhaps some discontent about some policy or some development that has taken place. And how does the state deal with it? Obviously, you will have to ensure that you try and resolve these issues peacefully through negotiation, through consensus building, through mediation. These are all methods that democracies use. But obviously there is also every need to maintain stability and to communicate to the people that the government would like and is doing its best to ensure that differences are resolved peacefully, that violence is not the way to solve these issues. And the role of every government is obviously to take care of every section of its people, to ensure that there is no discrimination, that there is no, unequal treatment of any section of the people. So that is the approach that a democracy always has to adopt, and I believe that we in India continue to adopt. There have been many instances through India's modern history where you've had insurgencies in certain parts of the country, and in most cases these have been resolved through dialogue, and the country has stayed united, has stayed integrated. And I think that is the test of our success, and that should be the index on which a government's success has to be measured.
Time for perhaps one more question.
Thank you. My name is Troy Anderson, and I'm studying international relations here at BYU. I've lived in Hyderabad and Bangalore for a few months, and my question is, you've talked a lot today about the United States and India working together in partnership. I wanted to ask a little bit how you see India's role increasing more internationally with the United Nations, for example. A couple of years ago when President Obama visited India, he mentioned that he looks forward to the day that India has a permanent seat on the Security Council, for example. Do you see India having an increasing role in global leadership? And if so, what steps do you think that India will take to achieve that? Thank you.
I believe India is already playing that increasingly prominent role in global affairs today. And why do I say that? I mean, if you look at organizations like the G20, for instance, and the way the G20 countries have come together to speak about the state of the world economy and the prescriptions that could be offered to set right, the recession within the global economy that has happened since 2007, 2008. India has played a very prominent role in those discussions and in the coming together of these countries. Similarly, if you look at UN peacekeeping, the largest number of peacekeepers that have been offered from any country is perhaps from India over the last few years, and the role that we've played in peace building, as it were, all around the world. And India, as the largest democracy in the world, nation of over 1 billion people, with an established record of high responsibility in the way it conducts its affairs abroad, I think makes it a standout country in terms of the role that it has been playing in global affairs, constructive role, and the role that it can continue to play in the future, increasingly prominent role. I referred to the cooperation between India and the United States, for instance, on maritime security, on the protection of the seas, of international waters, as it were, against threats like piracy and the other difficulties that maritime shipping faces today, for instance, internationally. When you look at the role that India plays in development in Africa, for instance, and in Central Asia, and in some parts of Southeast Asia, and in our own neighborhood, India is becoming not only a net provider of security in some cases, but also the provider of development assistance, of technical capacity building, of training. You know, we have expended $2 billion in Afghanistan, for instance, over the last few years in development projects, in women's empowerment, in education, in building hospitals and roads. Similarly, in Africa, the whole Pan-African e-network that is now in operation to deliver education and health facilities has been set up with India's assistance. So all this points to an increasingly constructive and highly responsible profile that India has taken in global affairs. So when President Obama spoke about the legitimacy of India's candidature, you know, that India deserved to be a member of the permanent member of the Security Council, it is absolutely logical and understandable that the United States should have supported India's case and continues to support India's case for permanent membership. Of course, the realization of that aim will depend on, you know, the international community working together and accepting the expansion of the Security Council. I think there is a widespread consensus within the United Nations that the number of permanent members should be increased, that the Security Council should be expanded, both in terms of permanent members and non-permanent members. And that is an effort that is ongoing, and India is very much a part of that effort with other like-minded countries, including Brazil, Japan, and Germany, and our African friends and partner countries. Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Ambassador, thank you so much for introducing so many significant things about your wonderful country, and especially highlighting the areas in which India and the United States have shared history, shared interests, shared values. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.